Good evening. Is it working? Yeah. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, Ms. Levy. Welcome, Ms. Mays. I'm very happy to have you here tonight, and the John Adams is pleased to have you as a speaker tonight for the Institute, Ms. Levy. I would like to compliment you with your book and the Dutch translation, Female Chauvinist Pigs, and it got the Dutch subtitle, and I think that's a very good subtitle, The Rise of the Bimbo Culture, and it's published by Meulenhof, and you can buy it later on here. Ms. Levy touches on 3 topics in her book, which I think are relevant for the Netherlands, and that's why it's so great to have her here tonight. First, the changing of our norm and value system, which is still a big issue in the Netherlands, and we're asking all the time, how tolerant should we be? And we see also a return to more religious-based values, because we have a lot of religious politicians now in our government. Secondly, the sexualization of our culture. And it's amazing to give the examples of how our language has been infiltrated with sex words, like my little kids were talking about pimping their toy cars or wearing their sexy football shoes. Everything is sexy nowadays, so from little kids from 4 years old till adults talking about sexy. And thirdly, and this is something Ms. Levy lays bare in her book, the misinterpretation and misunderstanding of feminism by the current bimbo culture. And I personally think that this is also happening in the Netherlands a lot. But that will be the discussion for tonight, and I hope we get an answer on questions like how liberated are we today in the Western world? And who are the real feminist icons of today? And should they have a little bit of a chauvinist female pig in them as well? That balance is maybe what we are looking for or not, but that will be the discussion for tonight. And I'm sure our moderator for tonight, Helene Mays, is going to come up with this question as well. Helene Mays is a New York-based columnist for the NRC Handelsblad, and she will come out with her book in 2 weeks' time. And the title of her book is Weg met het deeltijd feminisme. May I ask you to step up and introduce Ms. Levy?
Ladies and gentlemen, what do women want? Freud wondered in 1925 in a conversation with Marie Bonaparte. Girls just want to have fun, Cyndi Lauper replied to the godfather of psychoanalysis in 1983. But after reading Ariel Levy's very urgent book, you start to wonder whether girls and women alike just want to have sex. It's a great honor and pleasure for me to introduce to you Ariel Levy. Ariel is the author of Female Chauvinist Pigs, Women and the Rise of Raunch Culture in het Nederlands, de opkomst van de bimbo-cultuur. When the book was published almost 2 years ago in the United States, it got raving reviews and it sparked a heated debate. The New York Times book review wrote, Levy's argument is provocative and persuasive, a consciousness-raising call to arms. According to Vanity Fair, Levy strips the girls gone wild culture of its cuteness, arguing that post-feminist poster girls such as the Playboy bunnies offer only fake empowerment. And the Times of London wrote that the book is compulsory reading for everybody. Ariel Levy grew up in Larchmont, New York. She attended Wesleyan University, where she studied American literature and critical theory. After college, she worked briefly for Planned Parenthood, an organization in America that advocates women's rights to choose abortion. Levy was fired after just 1 week because she was such an extremely poor typist. When she was hired at New York Magazine as a typist once, and then she was hired at New York Magazine as a typist once again. And this part about Levy's resume I like in particular, as my mom did not want me to attend typewriting courses when I was in high school. She told me to aspire a job where I would have a typist working for me. Unfortunately, my mom did not anticipate the invention of the personal computer. By now, Ariel Levy is a well-known writer in the United States. She still works for New York Magazine, but her articles also appear in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and Vogue magazine. In her thoroughly researched book, Female Chauvinist Pigs, we see Levy spending a few days with a camera crew shooting a Girls Gone Wild video in Miami, where 19-year-olds masturbate for the camera and wild girls flash their tits. She interviews the CEO of Playboy and attends a cake party in Manhattan where women are making out with each other while male attendees get to watch. She interviews young teenage girls who perform oral sex on boys they barely know. Ariel Levy is, as she admitted jokingly in an interview with the St. Petersburg Times, fluent in raunch. For her book, Levy interviews also the remaining icons of the women's liberation movement of the 70s, like Erica Young and Susan Brown Miller. She hangs out with lesbians in San Francisco who aspire to remove their breasts completely so they can complete their transformations into boys. The most powerful and disturbing discussions to me are those with young college students who talk about their experiences of sex and self-image. The book is an investigation into the popularity of phenomena such as pole dancing, strip clubs, and vaginal rejuvenation surgery. Not coincidentally, Ariel Levy featured in Sunny Bergman's wonderful documentary, Beperkt Houdbaar, about women wanting nothing but the playmate look for their vagina. In a column for NRC Handelsblad, I wrote somewhat over a year ago that the objectification of women through the ages is the result of cultivated power relations in a patriarchal society. The reason that women got more objectified and stereotyped as Barbie dolls after the sexual revolution than before is because the women's movement in the 70s, the Tweede Feministische Golf, failed to end male dominance. In my book, which is going to be published next week, I wonder why women are still largely absent from the ruling class and what we can do to reach gender balance at the top. The relative confinement of women to the domestic sphere, in my view, is at the origin of the unremitting gender equality. It's the main reason why women are still considered inferior to men, or, in Levy's world, as something you don't want to be. What makes Levy's book especially compelling to me is that she does address the unresolved conflict between feminism on the one hand and the sexual revolution on the other side. An interesting question for tonight's discussion would be whether there actually is tension between the economic empowerment of women and their sexual freedom. And if so, how do we resolve it? I'm happy to give the floor to you, Ariel.
Hi. Thanks for speaking English. So obviously I'm here because I wrote this book, Female Chauvinist Pigs. And I wrote it because a couple of years ago, I noticed something strange was going on in the United States. It seemed like every time I left my house, I would see a teenage girl with a Playboy bunny on her t-shirt. And if I turned on the television, there was always a show on about strippers. And it was right around the time that Britney Spears was first becoming popular. And in my own industry magazines, it was the rise of what we call the lad mag. I don't know if you have that term. It's the English magazine. You know, it started in England, the lad mag, and it came to the United States. And maybe it's here too. It's Stuff and Maxim and that kind of thing. So it was the beginning of a wave of what I call raunch culture, or what the Dutch translation here is bimbo culture. Am I saying it right? So anyway, and in America at least, it's been on the rise ever since. And I mean, I've only been here a couple days, but from what I've heard, you see some of this here too. The key ingredients you need to make raunch culture, or bimbo culture, are cartoonish images of female sexuality, like the Playboy bunny, or the stripper, or the porn star. And I mean cartoonish in the sense that they're not specific or nuanced versions of female sexuality. They're broad, and they're silly. And supposedly, the spirit of raunch culture, bimbo culture, is tongue-in-cheek, is ironic, is humorous. And when I started interviewing young women about why they participate in this, I would often hear things along those lines, that they felt like being a part of this, they weren't prissy little women, you know what I mean? That they were sort of separating themselves from what they experienced as the politically correct uptightness of gender politics in the 80s and 90s. And so I think some of this is a generational rebellion. I think that nobody wants to turn into her mother, and whether your mother is a radical feminist or a right-wing Christian evangelist, either way, if you start dressing like a stripper, you're going to make your mother mad. So that's part of the reason this is happening. But I also heard a lot from young women where they thought that they were actually continuing the work of the women's movement. And to them, you know, body is liberated. And if you take that position as fact, that in order to be empowered, you have to be an exhibitionist, then it's all women, not just strippers or porn stars, but women in general who need to be putting on shows of their wantonness. And so, you know, the idea behind the title is that obviously, if male chauvinist pigs of years past were men who treated women like pieces of meat, then female chauvinist pigs today have said, you know, if you can't beat them, join them, and it's women making sex objects of other women and of themselves. So to explore this phenomenon, I went on spring break with this group that she mentioned, Girls Gone Wild, and I'm just going to read to you a few pages from the book about that experience, and you'll get a sense of what that group does. Late on a balmy Friday night in March 2004, a crew from the group Girls Gone Wild sat on the porch of the Chesterfield Hotel on Collins Avenue in Miami, preparing for the night of filming ahead of them. An SUV passed by, and two blonde heads popped out of the sunroof like prairie dogs, whooping into the night sky. If you ever watch television late at night, then you've already seen Girls Gone Wild. Well, in America, if you watch television late at night, you've seen Girls Gone Wild. Here, that's not so much, but can't have it all. So late at night, infomercials show bleeped out snippets of the brand's wildly popular, utterly plotless video, composed entirely from footage of young women flashing their breasts, their buttocks, or occasionally their genitals at the camera, and usually shrieking while they do it. The videos range slightly in theme, but the formula is steady and strong. Bring cameras to amped up places across the country where young people are drinking themselves batty, and offer t-shirts and trucker hats to the girls who flash or the guys who induce them to. It's a cultural phenomenon, said Bill Horn, Girls Gone Wild's 32-year-old vice president of communications. It's like a rite of passage. Puck, a surprisingly polite 24-year-old cameraman, was loading equipment into their van. He wore a Girls Gone Wild hat and t-shirt, which seemed to be enough to draw women to him. Two stunning young women who were already very close to naked asked Puck if they could come along with him if they promised to take off their clothes and kiss each other later for the camera, possibly even in a shower. There was no room for them in the car, but Puck was unconcerned. There would be other such offers. It's amazing, said Girls Gone Wild's tour manager, Mia Leist, a smiley, guileless 24-year-old. People flash for the brand. She pointed at a young woman sitting on the other end of the porch. Debbie got naked for a hat. Besides her new Girls Gone Wild hat, 19-year-old Debbie Cope was wearing a rhinestone Playboy bunny ring, white stilettos, and wee shorts that left the lowest part of her rear in contact with the night sky. Body glitter shimmered across her tan shoulders and rose in a sparkling arc from her cleavage to her clavicle. The body is such a beautiful thing, she said. If a woman's got a pretty body and she likes her body, let her show it off. It exudes confidence when people wear little clothes. Cope was a tiny person who could have passed for 15. On the preceding night, she had done a scene for Girls Gone Wild, which is to say she pulled down her shorts and masturbated for them on camera in the back of a bar. She said she felt bad for, quote, not doing it right, because for some reason she could not achieve orgasm. People watch the videos and think the girls in them are real slutty, but I'm a virgin, Cope said proudly. And yeah, Girls Gone Wild is for guys to get off on, but the women are beautiful and it's fun. The only way I could see someone not doing this is if she were considering a career in politics. Then a song Cope liked came on the radio inside the hotel, and she started doing that dance you sometimes see in hip-hop videos, the one where women shake their butts so fast they seem to blur. Everyone piled into a van and followed Crazy Debbie to a dance club in nearby Coconut Grove, where she knew all the locals. Fun girls, Cope promised. It was a vast, multi-level place, and every song had a relentless, throbbing beat. Bill Horn surveyed the scene and landed his eyes on a cluster of blondes. Now those are some girls who should go wild, he said. Puck and Sam, the cameraman, passed by with 3 young women who'd volunteered to do a private out on the balcony. Here we go, said Horn. He gave a little laugh. There's some part of me that always wants to shriek, don't do it. But he definitely didn't, and they definitely did. The trio started making out in a ravenous lump, grabbing at each other's rears and running around while trying to remain upright. Ultimately, one girl fell over and landed giggling on the floor, a characteristic endpoint for a Girls Gone Wild scene. Later, I spoke to her on the phone. I'm not at all bisexual, she said, not that I have anything against that, but when you think about it, I'd never do that really. It's more for show. A polite way of putting it is, it's like a reflex. That quote, that it's like a reflex, is to me the essence of bimbo culture, of raunch culture, because the point is that it's not an authentic expression of what a woman is feeling or in the mood to do. It's an automatic performance. And what I was interested in finding out was how an interest in raunch culture went from being seen as something taboo and secretive and certainly anti-feminist to being seen as good for women. And when I went to interview Christy Hefner, who's the daughter of Hugh Hefner, the founder of Playboy, and she's the CEO, I'm just going to read you very quickly what she told me about why women are reading Playboy now. Not Playgirl, Playboy, the one with the naked women. She says, a lot of women read the magazine. We know they read it because we get letters from them. And this was proof, she said, that the, quote, post-sexual revolution, post-women's movement generation that is now out there in their late 20s and early 30s, and then it continues with the generation behind them too, has just a more grown-up, comfortable, natural attitude about sex and sexiness that is more in line with where guys were a couple generations before. The rabbit head symbolizes sexy fun, a little bit of rebelliousness. It's an obvious, I'm taking control of how I look and the statement I'm making, as opposed to I'm embarrassed about it or I'm uncomfortable with it. So you see, in that formulation, bimbo culture, raunch culture is not an entertainment option. It's a test of a woman's uptightness. If a woman doesn't like this, then she doesn't have a natural attitude about sex. She's uncomfortable with her sexuality. And it's such an interesting thing because, of course, her father and Playboy in general was a major target of the women's movement for good reason. Hugh Hefner has been quoted many times through the years as saying that he doesn't believe in equality between the sexes and that when he wants to speak to somebody, he goes to talk to men, and that he doesn't find women to be interesting conversational partners. And the reason that he chose the bunny as the mascot of his company is because a bunny is something soft and quiet and frisky the way a girl should be. So it's obvious to me that Playboy isn't about women's sexuality, but somehow wearing that symbol has come to mean just the opposite in many young women's minds. And it's not just, girls on spring break who are drunk. In America, before the 2004 Olympics, the Athens Games, many of our female athletes were pictured naked in Playboy or next to naked in the lad mags I was telling you about earlier. And I thought it was such an interesting thing because these are women who are at the pinnacle of their field. They're already famous. They don't need the exposure or the money. It's just part of what we now think of as women's work, as what you do if you're a fully successful female, that this is going to be part of what you're doing. And it's interesting because recently, very recently, we would have reviled, the revelation that a woman had participated in any kind of pornography could cost her her job. But it's now the case, Paris Hilton, the thing that launched her in America from just another young woman to being as famous as she is, the thing that launched her celebrity was the appearance of this amateur porn video. And obviously not all women are going to be amateur porn stars, but you do see, the cardio striptease class in gyms throughout the country. And I went and I interviewed one of the founding choreographers who was telling me that he was so proud that women, were coming to get in touch with their sexuality, and he was really happy that a mother had just come and brought her 16-year-old daughter and the girls' friends for a sweet 16 birthday party. And he was so happy that they were getting in touch with their sexuality, and it's just so interesting to me, this idea that in order to get in touch with your own innate sexuality, you have to learn things from a woman whose job it is to fake lust. So that women are now supposed to imitate an imitation of real female sexual pleasure and power, and that's going to teach us to be more ourselves. And everything I'm saying here, I mean, it all seemed like common sense to me, but I was vaguely aware as I was writing this book that it was going to be, controversial, but I put it out of my head because I don't like conflict. So, but so to my sort of surprise, when it did come out, some people were offended by the title, which was supposed to be funny, but maybe it's not. And then a lot of people asked me if I thought that women should wear the burqa. That has been a big response. And of course, that's not where I'm coming from at all. I mean, the question I also get very frequently is, what's wrong with a woman wearing a thong, or you say a string, if she wants to. But the key thing is if she wants to, if this is something that's turning women on. And I don't think that the focus of bimbo culture is on female sexual pleasure or what do women want. I think the focus is on how do you be desirable, not what do you desire. So I think we're going backwards in that way. And I also think that if it was just one thing, if you just had Paris Hilton or you just had strings for children in stores or you just had Playboy, that there's nothing to worry about. But you see it all happening at the same time, and it starts to tell you a story about what we value in women. And I think there is something wrong with a culture that equates the selling of sex with sexual liberation, because as far as I can tell, they're not the same thing. And I think it's particularly problematic for very young women because they never existed in a time where the feminist movement had a very strong public presence. So there's no way this can be ironic for them because they've never existed in a time when hoe wasn't part of the language, and this is all they've ever known. And I think that, so basically, I think that what my criticism adds up to is not so much that the culture is over-sexualized, but that it's under-sexualized, that this is a very limited, formulaic vision of female sexuality. And it's actually very much in line with an old-time conservative concept of women's sexuality, because a stripper or a porn star, of course, has to be paid to have sex. So it's a sexuality that needs to be activated. It's not just something that naturally is part of female humanness. So that's the basic concept of this book. And now Helene and I are going to have a discussion about it, and then I'll answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ariel. Does it work? Thanks.
Can you hear us? Oh, God.
For your introduction. It seems that as long as men pull the strings, women behave like dolls. Would that be?
Well, I think at this point, women are doing part of the dirty work. It's not just that men are, of course, still in a lot more power than women. But it's not, as we see, it's Christy Hefner who's pulling the strings at Playboy. It's Mia Leiss, this young woman who's getting the women to come and strip for Girls Gone Wild. So it's interesting to see what some women are doing once they get power,
You make that point very eloquently in your book. The writer Erica Young, who in the 70s promoted the idea of the zipless fuck, that's women fucking like men, is quoted in your book as saying, "I look at my daughter and her friends in their 20s, and they are reveling in their sexuality. But I would be happier if my daughter and her friends were crashing through the glass ceiling instead of the sexual ceiling." Let's see, the US Senate 50% female, that's now about 15%. Let's see, women in decision-making position, that's power. Sexual freedom can be a smoke screen for how far we haven't come. You say that conflicts between the women's movement and the sexual liberation movement remain unsolved. Do you believe that sexual freedom works like a smoke screen, or is it even counterproductive to the objectives of the women's movement for women's ability to crash through the glass ceiling, to get into decision-making positions?
Well, a couple things. First of all, I don't think that this represents sexual freedom. I mean, that's right there. I don't think that what this is saying is, oh, women have so much sexual freedom. I think that this is a new kind of role play. So if before there was a lot of pressure to be, you know, the angel in the house was the literary convention, what we called it in the United States. Now there's this pressure to be an exhibitionist. And I don't think that's freedom. I think that's a new role to play and a new kind of emphasis on something other than what you just happen to want. You know, so, and I think it's I think that those things happen together. I think that if we got in a position where we had real power in general, you would see us having more power sexually too.
Okay, thanks.
I don't think they're at odds.
But do you, then what's your, to sum up, how do you think about the sexual revolution? Where have we come? Do you think it's positive? Has it been negative in total? Do you have any assessment of that? Because you say we now fell into a new role model, not a stereotype. But for me, I don't think we should, you know, het kind met het badwater weggooien. We should not just, you know, forget about the benefits of the sexual revolutions. I think for a lot of women, it also has brought a lot of increase in sexual pleasure, especially, I believe, for women. And I do miss that point in your book.
Well, I think the point I'm trying to make is that what divided the women's movement, you know, in its most concentrated form in the 1970s was this debate about how to represent sexuality. And of course, you know, in the United States, we had on the one hand the anti-porn feminists, and the other hand the so-called pro-sex feminists who said, you know, if feminism is about freedom, then women should be free to make pornography or to participate in pornography. And of course, the anti-porn feminists, they thought they were being pro-sex too. They also thought that if you rid the world of, you know, what they saw as objectifying pornography, you were making room for more freedom of sexual expression. And they never resolved that, you know, because it is so complicated. So I think that women of my generation have reaped enormous benefits from the sexual revolution and the women's movement, both. I think the women's movement was unbelievably successful if you look at how much was accomplished in such a short period of time. But I think this issue remains unresolved. And I think what we're seeing in raunch culture, in bimbo culture, is a very commercialized, reductive version of sexual liberation. I think that, you know, breast implants and G-strings and Brazilian bikini waxes, that's not sexual liberation. That's just some stuff to go shopping for.
It's consumerism. Britney Spears probably is the saddest example of a girl gone wild. In your book, you pitch her together with Christina Aguilera and Paris Hilton at the origins of the bimbo culture. On the first page, you write, Britney Spears is becoming increasingly unclothed. And that's the edition 2 years ago. At the time you wrote that passage, you probably could not have imagined Britney to expose her private parts to waiting photographers while exiting a limousine as she did last December. A month later, Spears reportedly tried to commit suicide. What do you make of all of this?
Britney is such an interesting case because when I was first working on this book, you know, it was a different era of Britney. And do you also know Jessica Simpson here? So when I started writing this book, the big pop stars, were Jessica Simpson and Britney. And it was such a good example of this because they were both women or girls at that point, who sang about sexuality. They had really sexy videos. They were in really sexy magazine spreads. But they were both virgins, and they both told us over and over again, I'm a virgin, I'm saving myself for marriage. And I think that was the ultimate in the American fantasy. Like, you look like a whore, but you're really a virgin, don't worry. And now that Britney has been married, has been a mother, has lost her virginity, she's no longer the American fantasy. She's now reviled. I mean, I think part of the reason you saw her melt down was because she completely fell from favor, and some of that, you know, it had lots of, I'm not friends with her. I don't know exactly what happened, but I think that to be a sexual idol in America, it can't be some woman who really is human about her sexuality. It has to be some combination of, I'm putting on a show, but don't worry, it's under control.
Your book is full of examples how pornified and sex-obsessed American society has become. Last week in the Netherlands, the ChristenUnie, that's the Christian party that's holding office right now, protested the large display of a woman wearing a tiny bikini in the center of Utrecht. The display is about 200 square meters, which is more than 2,000 square feet. The woman's bikini is gold-colored and she looks quite lustful. There may also have been some degree of photoshopping to make her belly look tighter. Would you want displays like these to be banished from the streets, like the Christian Unie, the Christian Party wants?
Well, first of all, I've seen that bikini ad. Where I live in New York City, I mean, that's nothing. You see stuff like that everywhere. There's a huge multi-story billboard of Jenna Jameson, the world's top-selling porn star, in Times Square. And I guess I just think that, censorship is never the answer. You can't just ban these things because then you haven't accomplished anything. I think the hope is to appeal to people on a consciousness level. I mean, my hope, this book is directed at women. It's only about women. It's not about men. It's about women. It's directed at women because I think that we have made enough progress that we can make choices now. Whether or not there's a big poster up of a woman in a bikini, you can still decide how you want to live your life. And I'm encouraging women to think about their own desires and to stop putting so much emphasis on being desirable.
Okay. Well, because also... Oh, hey.
That was terrifying. Don't do that again. That's the scariest thing that's happened all day.
2 months ago at the annual Dutch Home Fair, the Huishoudbeurs, the book Stout was published. In English, the title presumably would have been Naughty. One of the authors, Marlies Dekkers, is known for her women lingerie that hints at SM. The other author, my namesake Helene van Rooyen, is well known in the Netherlands for her very explicit sexual and adulterous novels. The book has pictures showing Helene and Marlies making out with each other, touching and licking each other's lips. And those are even the most chaste pictures, because the rest is more pornographic. Of Helene's photo shoot, pictures of Helene's photo shoot at Playboy are included, and pictures of Marlies' pubic hair. But at least we now know that Marlies Dekkers still has it all, and she doesn't shave it. Helene and Marlies say that their book is not only about women being sexy, but that it's also about women being financially independent from their husbands, and about women about being ambitious in their career. So the authors argue that Stout should not be read as a call for women to be slutty, but as a call for women to be bold, uncompromising, stout-hearted. Do you believe that this kind of selling two for the price of one actually works? Maybe it's even the only one way to sell it because sex sells?
But see, the thing is, just because something sells doesn't make it feminism. It doesn't make it good for women, And I think we should recognize, like Erica Jong, what she was saying is, I don't like to see women fooled. And that's what I'm saying too. I like to drink vodka, but when I drink it, I don't imagine that it's vitamin juice. I mean, it's bad for me. And I think that, so it's okay to have pornography, it's okay to have all these things, but let's not pretend that it's feminism. It's something else.
Yeah, but do you think if the relationship, because that's still, but maybe that's also the difference between the Netherlands and America. I live in New York and I find that the women's movement had much better results in the United States. There are much more women in powerful positions, in decision-making positions. But do you think that there may be that the whole sexualization of women, that they may hold them back because they, for example, if women see very sexist pictures before they undergo a test for their entry to the university, then they score much lower. The test result is much lower than when they don't see those same sexist pictures.
Well, I think the problem with having the most prominent, visible female members of society be sort of sexual ornaments is, of course, then it affects the way people think about women in general. And the fact that you don't see objectification of men tells you something. Unless you're in a gay bar, you don't see men as sexual objects. It tells you about the kind of the limits of that power. And that's what I think the problem is. I don't think that there's an acknowledgement. I can't read that book because it's in Dutch, and Americans can't read Dutch. But
it's full of
pictures,
I'm sorry,
interesting I'm not saying it's
pictures.
Okay. But my point is that the fact is it tells you all you need to know, that there's really no significant presence of male strippers. Playgirl magazine with the naked men, it barely sells. There's no Boys Gone Wild. So it tells you something about the power relationship of being an erotic performer and being in real control.
So, but this book, and that is two women who were the authors, totally fits your theory that's women now doing it to other women, the objectification.
Well, it's an old strategy. I mean, in the United States, long before black people were allowed to vote or were allowed to go to the same restaurants as white people, they were allowed to put on shows, minstrel shows. And I think that, it's a parody of the stereotypes of an oppressed group. And I think stripping is a parody of female sexuality. And, in black culture in America, there's a phrase, the brown paper bag test. And what it meant was that if your skin was lighter than a brown paper bag, you could sort of be a member of the black aristocracy. And that obviously wasn't policed by white people. It was a black aristocracy taking in the ideology of white supremacy. So you don't always have to have you don't have to have men there to instill the values of the patriarchy. You don't have white people there to instill the values of white supremacy. People can do it to themselves.
Yeah. Stepping into stereotypes. That's the way you describe it with tom-tomming, but I didn't use it for now because
so complicated.
Maybe you can tell a bit more. Yeah, but I find it very interesting. So.
Well, basically, I was just saying what I mean about the parallel, but the, other than the Bible, the best-selling book in America is Uncle Tom's Cabin, which was this story written before the Civil War, and in it, there's two ways that the black characters cope with their blackness. Either they try to pass, which is, the author, Harriet Beecher Stowe, had this one character who was light enough to pass. Like I was saying, he would have passed the brown paper bag test. And then there's Uncle Tom, who reifies the stereotypes of Stowe and of his masters, and he's servile, and he doesn't need to be shackled because he's so servile he would never try to run away. And so then that's where we get the phrase, tomming, meaning you do what the master wants you to get along. And so we see some of those kinds of thinking in what women are doing, in either wanting to be like a man, which is a phrase I heard over and over again from women, that they wanted to be like a man, in terms of work, and what they really meant is they wanted to be successful, they wanted to be adventurous, they wanted to be funny, they wanted to be aggressive, but they allowed themselves to believe this idea that those were manly, that they were being like a man. On the other hand, they wanted to look like a cartoon woman, like a Barbie doll. And when I was in Antwerp the other night, I saw that the makeup company MAC right now, their campaign is MAC loves Barbie. Mm-hmm. And there was a giant thing in Antwerp where it was a white woman and a black woman made up to look exactly like Barbie dolls. That's right in line with this, that we're looking back to these sort of bimbo role models to teach us how to be successful women. And it's backwards movement.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, anyway, sex sells because from the book Stout, today 100,000 copies have been sold. But there's also another thing, because I find as a journalist that women-bashing pieces and women bash are much easier to sell to the media than articles in which I promote more jobs for more women in top jobs. So 6 months ago, we had an event here in Amsterdam where Euro Commissioner Nelly Kroes, she's in the European Commission in Brussels, and she's very powerful because she is giving $100 million fines to Microsoft. But Nelly Kroes and I made a pitch for gender balance at the top. That means a minimum of 40% women and a minimum of 40% men in corporate boards and also at university professors and in politics.
That's one I read. Yeah. Very good.
Nonetheless, so there was only one. There was Nelly Kroes, Ben Verwaayen. They were all quite well-known Dutch established politicians. Femke Halsema, and also the room was filled. A lot of people were present there. There was just one local newspaper covering the event about gender balance, more women in top jobs. And the headline that read, and I'm first going to say it in Dutch, Vrouw moet van terrasje komen. We had talked a whole evening about women in top jobs. And it's hardly translatable because you don't have the same culture of being on the streets and just having lazy beers all the time. No. But it's women to have come off the street cafe. Like if women are always hanging out outside on a nice terrace in the sun and drinking rosé with each other. So that was the headline reading. Well, like women have to get to work. Or not be so lazy.
Get out of the cafes. Get out.
Yeah, get out and get to work.
Right.
So while the whole evening had a totally other point. So it was not only sex sells, but also that sexism, misogyny sells maybe even better.
Uh-huh.
Don't you think so?
Yeah, I do.
Do you find the same?
Well, I mean, I'd be lying if I said that I've had a really hard time in my career. I've had a very easy time in my career. I think that I've been very lucky, and the magazine I've worked for the last 10 years has allowed me to write about a lot of interesting things, and I don't think I do write anything that's misogynist. So I've had a really good. I've been lucky about what I've been able to sell writing-wise. But I think you're certainly right that what most media wants is sexism or sex.
Yeah, but also in the newspaper, that the headline they always pick out is even live with childcare. That if they're comparing the results from children who are brought to childcare and children who are stay-home moms, that they always pick out the fact that if there even is an insignificant difference, then they always say, yeah, but still it's better for children to stay with their at home and not to be brought to childcare.
Right.
Well, in fact, the result of the research was that there's, in fact, it's insignificant, the difference, and women the children that go to childcare are better in their language development is much better. Anyway, so there's a way of stereotyping still going on there, I would say. In your book, you described that men prefer girly girls, and indeed, college-educated, highly successful women have long had a bad reputation for marrying less and squandering their fertility. But a short while ago, there was an encouraging article in the Boston Globe telling us that the tables are about to turn, to use the famous phrase from female chauvinist pig par excellence, Christina Aguilera. In a historic reversal of past trends, ambitious career women are now more likely to be married and have children than other women. In addition to that, a study found that the husband's view of the quality of his marriage actually improved as the wife worked more. Do you believe this to be a lasting trend? And if so, don't you think it's better to put energy in promoting more women in the top jobs than trying to push back raunch culture?
Well, I don't say that men prefer girly girls. I don't think that men do. I think that first of all, I think that men want all different things, just like women do. I mean, I think that's my point, is that sexuality is something extremely complicated and interesting, and to reduce it to, strings and breast implants is to make something very interesting, very boring. And I don't think that that's what men want at all. I think that depends on the man. And so that's not my position. In terms of whether it's more valuable to try to get women in top jobs or to try to push back raunch culture, I don't see why we can't do both at the same time. They both are the same goal. They work together.
No, that's true. I totally agree. Maybe there's somebody in the public who wants to ask a question. Yeah, please come forward.
Great questions. Great questions. Thank you. Your questions, I mean.
As a son of the mother and as a husband of the wife and as a father of the daughter, I'm very much interested. I may be interested in the question, do you think that women in this type of culture are less happy or more happy? Because you have quite negative words about this phenomenon, but you don't say that women are maybe more happy or less happy. That's in the end important. It's also important if you think about it. If women are more happy, then I say it's okay. But yeah, less happy, then it's not okay. So my question is, it's not so much interesting what you think about it.
Right.
The more I think
Well, if you read the book, I mean, the whole book is interviews with women about that question, about is this bringing you satisfaction and pleasure? And the reason that I'm critical of raunch culture is that so many women I spoke to said to me that it wasn't making them happy, it wasn't turning them on. It's like that girl gone wild said, it's like a reflex. It's, you see an entire culture telling you that this is the way you behave. If you're empowered and liberated, you think it's true and you do it. And if all these women were saying to me, oh, it's fantastic, my life is one continuous, you know, sequence of power and orgasm, then I'd be very happy. But that's not what I heard. Well, they did. Yeah. Because it takes you further away from pursuing what you want if you're always trying to live up to something artificial. So that doesn't tend to yield happiness. But I mean, I have not conducted an international survey of how many women are happy, and I don't think that we could judge whether or not, I mean, there's a lot of things that go into whether a person's happy or not just raunch culture. No. No. What is it? Opportunity is nice. Opportunity has certainly made me happy.
Okay, is there another? Yes, please come to the microphone if they're working. That would be very helpful. Naima Tahir, she also wrote it.
I also wrote an erotic novel. Thank you for your presentation. I think it's really important for these times now. I have a few remarks. If you look at the role women have played over history, they've always been traditional roles, such as the role of mother, daughter, chaste, virgin, what have you. And every time a woman steps out of that role, she is actually judged as being disobedient. And I think this whole pattern of women being disobedient or naughty or breaking the rules is somewhat a reaction to that. So I was wondering what your views would be on that.
This is now the rules.
Yeah.
Behaving this way is the rule.
Exactly. So I think it's kind of a caricature of just saying, well, you call me disobedient because I step out of my role. I'm going to be disobedient, and you cannot catch me. So maybe it's a reaction to protesting against the traditional role and protesting against when you step out of that role, you are called disobedient.
Right.
So maybe women amongst each other should not be judgmental to women who step out of their traditional roles. That's my first point. My second point is, to me, when women step out of roles and when women act in such a way, you know, being porn stars or being sexy or being attractive, they're kind of calling out to everyone saying, possess me.
Yes.
That's the extreme way to put it, but the other way to put it, the psychological way, might be that they just want to belong somewhere. And maybe the culture of individualism has gone to such extremes that women just want to be possessed by a man or by a woman. They just want to be loved, and they don't know how. So maybe we've forgotten just to be feminine, just to be a woman, and maybe we've forgotten to show people by just being a woman, you know, possess me, love me, things like that.
I think you bring up a lot of really interesting points. I mean, I think first of all, I both agree and disagree with what you just said, because I think that you're right that part of the reason we see this happening is because the women's movement was so successful and changed so much in such a short period of time. And when you have a society that's just shifted radically in a short period of time, what you see happening is that I think what women are doing is saying, it's a way of saying to men and to each other, don't worry, you know, I may be competing with you for a job and for a spot at a university and, you know, this, that, and the other, but don't worry, I'm still a Barbie doll. I'm still, you know, I'm still identifiable in this gender role. But what I disagree with you about is the idea that a porn star or stripper is rebelling against traditional gender roles. That is a traditional gender role, that a woman is a sex object and that a woman is there to put on a show and to entertain men, and that her sexuality is something that has to be activated by men or by money, that she's not going to just, you know, you don't need to go anywhere. I'm sitting here, I have my sexuality. Nobody has to pay me to have it. I don't have to wax my vagina. It's part of me. And so having it set up where the only women we see as sexual are performers, that is a traditional role.
And now the other point you made about women wanting to be possessed. Because that was the other part you made, and you did not.
Well, women want all different things. Like she said, some women want to feel dominated. Some women want to be dominating. Women want all different things, and so do men. And I think that we're very narrow-minded about, this idea that you can say, well, this is what women want sexually. I mean, it's ridiculous. There's a lot of women.
Ja, de meneer achter.
Did you? I'm as well a bikini designer as a researcher, so I'm maybe in a difficult position.
You seem fine.
I seem fine. You too. I have a load of questions. I could begin with the nice boot you have on, because the principle of high heels was the same thing 20 years ago as the string is now. But what I'm really wondering about, in one of my professions, I work a lot of models, and I have seen two kind of girls who actually use their beauty to make a part of a living. Did you see any division between the girls you interviewed? Because, in my opinion, what I saw was girls who actually believe in beauty. The subject of beauty is lying below a lot of this discussion.
Yeah.
Who actually believe that they could make a living out of beauty, or other girls who happened to be beautiful, did their college study and said, well, I can as well fly to Milan or to New York to do a simple thing as sit behind a counter and earn some money. That's a big division, and one of the first type of girls were coming into the studio very stressed out because that was the only thing they had in life, their only business, and the other ones were very relaxed and did very nice jobs. So, did you see any division between the girls? Because the Marlies Dekkers and the Helene van Rooyen part actually seem to make a living, a very good economic and very independent way, and be successful. And that's something different as some of the girls I get the impression you interviewed in your book.
The first question, which I think is a very legitimate question about I'm wearing high heels, I think it's a good point, and I think it's a legitimate point that, why do I think high heels and long hair are attractive? Obviously, because I'm from this culture, and these are the standards of beauty I've seen, and I want to be perceived as beautiful. And people in general, we're social creatures. We want to fit in, often. So I think it's a legitimate thing to say, so why are you doing that? Because you want to fit in. But I'm not telling you that I think these boots are nice. They're pretty. I like clothes. They're pretty. But pretty is not the same thing as empowered. So I'm not pretending that by looking feminine, that's making me, that's the root of my humanity and my success and my feminism. That's my outfit.
But what if I told you it works a little bit? For me, I like.
I'd say
I like high heels.
You, dude.
Did it actually shift a little bit of the power balance?
Huh? No, because what gives me power in this balance is that I'm on stage. And the reason I'm on stage is that I wrote the book.
True, but that's not apart from the fact that you're a beautiful woman and wearing high heels.
Nah.
If the question is, how does being attractive affect the way you're perceived? I mean, I think that being rich or being attractive, there are all sorts of advantages that people have. But, nobody knows how much any one of those things affect their experience. They've only ever been themselves. What is? That you don't have to be beautiful to get.
What's the difference between men and women? Maybe you can.
No.
All right, we'll move on.
Okay, we move on.
Otherwise, people are going to start throwing tomatoes at that
Next
guy.
question.
My name is Stine Jensen. I haven't published any erotic novels yet.
No, but you wrote a very
but
beautiful
I have
article.
two questions.
I haven't either.
I will put them as briefly as possible. What do you see going on now? Is it getting worse with bimbo or raunch culture? And what are your suggestions for reverting it? What can we do about it? Secondly, what do you find positive role models for female sexuality? Because I agree with you that when you go out on the streets, especially in New York, you find all these images.
Yeah.
Can you give some examples or suggestions for positive female role models for exploring your sexuality?
It's such an interesting question. People ask me that a lot. But to me, I think sexuality is so varied and so personal that it depends on your taste. I don't think you can say, here's a role model for sexuality, because it depends on you and what you want, and I don't know what you want, and I don't know, so I can't think of somebody who's the embodiment of that, because I don't know your taste, so I think that, but in terms of what can we do, how do we make progress, I think the feminists had it right all along. I think we have to return to those ideas, and the reason I wrote this book is that I felt like for young women, a lot of the old American feminist classics didn't deal with their world. It dealt with a world that was slightly remote to them. I mean, even the last duo of American feminist books, Backlash and The Beauty Myth. That was over 10 years ago. There was no internet then. There was, it was a really different world. So I thought it was time. All I could think to do to make what I hope is a contribution to going in the right direction is to write this book. That's all I knew how to do.
Petra?
Well, hi, I'm Petra Stienen. I'm a diplomat, and I worked and lived for a very long time in the Arab world. I will also publish a book about it. It seems that everybody's writing books these days, and you're inspiring as well. I'm actually intrigued by the concept of femininity and professionalism, and in a way, Arab women, or maybe I should say Mediterranean women, have been a role model to me, because having been brought up in the Netherlands, it somehow seemed that being a professional and being a feminine woman doesn't go together.
In the Netherlands.
In the Netherlands,
yeah.
You are either. For me, I can only speak from my own personal experiences. And then I came to the Arab world, and somehow we have this concept that this is a segregated society, women are covered up. But for me, working in that environment, the women who are working there are professional and feminine. And it was a very inspiring experience to me. And somehow, I every now and then thought of the quote of Kissinger, who once said that power and knowledge are the best aphrodisiacs. But it somehow seems that in the Western world that doesn't work for women. So my questions are, how do you perceive this concept of femininity and professionalism? And the second one is this whole thing about what works for men apparently doesn't work for women. To be powerful and knowledgeable sort of diminishes you as a attractive woman.
Thank you. I mean, I think it's interesting because you say, I of course believe you that you had an easier time there, but yet you are so successful here, So, you must have figured out a way to do it. And all I can really say about why it is, that works for, that Kissinger can say, all you have to do is look at Kissinger to see that that's true, that power is the best aphrodisiac. Think of all the beautiful women he's been with, and he's like this potato with legs. And I think it's a clear articulation of our inequality still. I think that, I hope that as women gain more and more power and more equality, that will stop seeming manly. Women will stop saying, I want to be like a man if they want to be powerful. They'll think, I just want to be powerful because that's a human trait, and stop associating that with manliness. And I hope men will find that more and more attractive in women. It's hard for me because so many men I know are so interested in powerful, intelligent, fun. The only men I spend time with are men who are interested in really articulate, really strong women. So, I can't believe that all men want Barbie dolls.
It would also say something about the male ego, that it's very vulnerable if they cannot stand to have a powerful woman next to them.
Why would you want to spend time with a man like that, I guess, is my question.
Yeah. Anyway, but it seems that according to a writer in the Boston Globe, that the trend is turning. And so now, not ambitious women who stay home are less educated, that they lag behind women who are highly educated in the marriage market. So there is hope for everybody here, all women here. So There's also a thing what I liked a lot, because a lot of people asking me why I have a drive for feminism, and it's always hard to explain because they think that you have had to have some terrible experience. But you, just like me, you were raised, I think, in a very gender-neutral environment. Your father was working. Was also in the pro-choice movement, and your mother was very conscious about feminism. Still, in a very interesting radio interview with National Public Radio, you said you have always been impassioned about feminism. That you were standing on a soapbox when you were in 6th grade. Could you tell us a little more about it? Were you treated differently than boys?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this at dinner a little bit. I mean, as she said, both my parents, I think, could be described as feminists. And my dad worked for lots of NGOs, and several, many of them were feminist groups. And my mom, for many years, was a child care provider, which I think in its way is a feminist thing to do, because she was saying, okay, I'm going to give quality care to these children, and so you can go and work and feel that your children are being cared for in a real way. And I guess I felt like the primary message I got outside of my house, from teachers until I was in college, was be quiet, just you take up too much space and you're making too much noise. And I'm very happy they didn't actually beat it out of me.
You make that. Are there more questions in the? Okay.
Yeah, hi.
First name.
What's that?
Your name, maybe?
Yeah, my name is Jesse Kamphuis. My question was actually more about, gender and roles, because, I mean, as intellectual human beings, we can shift from roles rather easily, and the impression I get on your based on your empirical work is that what you're doing is trying to make a sketch of the way that the culture is actually going through to popular culture, where young girls, they actually aspire to a role which they somehow have to adapt to, that they feel that they have to adapt to, and well, I was wondering whether you could reflect on how you shift from
How do you get outside of that?
Well, yeah,
I
mean, if you're intelligent, you know how to play with the rules, and this is something that you can do, I mean, one day you have for different occasions, you have different attires that are suitable for different occasions. Whereas this whole, I mean, there was just
because now something become of the masses? Is that what you're trying to say, or?
Well, actually, what I have in the back of my mind was something that was in the newspaper, I think today or yesterday. It was about how like this breezer sex. This is that young girls in the Netherlands, here in the Netherlands.
And that they, in exchange for a vodka, have sex. So girls of 12 years old, or for a metro in exchange for a metro
I'm
card.
offending people, so I have to.
What's happening in the back there?
Yeah.
Irritated with the question. I must agree. Yeah.
Well,
why?
Because it goes away from the discussion that we could have.
Which is?
Well, I'm not the one who came up with the question that
No, but
but I think let's try to. I think I'm going to try to clean this one up. I think that I think what you're saying is, if people are seeing these roles, and people can play with roles, so why can't they, as intelligent people, play with these roles? And I think the answer is that when a trend like this becomes this ubiquitous, it stops feeling like an option, and it starts feeling like an obligation. I think if you were seeing this as one role among many, that would be less problematic, but I think it's become the predominant way we recognize female sexuality. We can't imagine the concept of female sexuality without seeing like a stripper's pole. That's when it becomes problematic. That's what I think.
Okay,
Thanks
another
a lot.
There must be more, because now we First lady in the back and then you.
Hi, my name is Lonneke van Genuchten. I'm also a journalist, but not in your field. But I was wondering, where does Madonna come in this whole discussion? When I grew up in the 90s, when I was 13-year-old and getting involved with boys and everything, you had Madonna who said, free yourself, celebrate your sexuality and everything. And now I wonder, did she create a kind of monster with her spirit at that time, or is this a different development? And when it's the last case, is it Madonna who could show us a different way of expressing our femininity? I just wonder, where does she come in, or doesn't we need her anymore?
I guess, I mean, it seems like Madonna's maybe more powerful to you than she is to me. I mean, I don't think Madonna has the single-handed power to come back and change the culture, and I also don't think that she single-handedly created anything. I think that she was a pop star. You know, she was a material girl who cashed in on the ethos of the times with the talent that she had. But lots of people ask about her. To me, I don't see her as that powerful a force.
Okay.
Yeah, my question is, as a woman and as a black woman, I'm very concerned about this sort of sexualized of women in the mainstream, specifically when someone like a very popular radio DJ can call women hoes. And it's accepted.
We just found, he got fired. They just told me they canned him.
Yeah.
She's talking about one of the top radio hosts.
Or second to Howard Stern, I think.
Yeah, right. Great. Had said something disparaging and he called, what did he say, Aim? He called them nappy-headed hoes, like a racist, misogynist thing about these basketball stars in America, female basketball stars. Fortunately, they did can him. They did fire him.
Yeah, but what was disturbing to me was that, he didn't think that that he could say it. That's the thing, and it wasn't his first time saying sexualized things about women and about black women in particular, and that you had reporters defending that because they say, well, it comes from hip hop. But will they sit down with a hip hop artist and go on his show and make those conversations? So I'm really concerned that we're in a culture that sort of tries to have it both ways, where we say, well, okay, if some people can do it, then why can't we do it? And I think they missed the point, is that those people who are doing it, that's not right.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think that you bring up an interesting and important point, which is that, I don't know about here, but certainly in the United States, there's plenty of criticism of the values of hip-hop and the way, the bitches and hoes and pimps and the way women are depicted in hip-hop. But people seem to fail to recognize that those are the same values you see in mainstream culture, but they find it offensive because it's black people doing it. So then it seems shocking. But it's the same values you see in a Britney Spears video. And I think that's a really important point.
Hi, my name is Michelle, and I'm an American who lives in Amsterdam. And I am curious, I think of this television program you were speaking of, Girls Gone Wild. I haven't seen it, but I actually feel very sorry for these girls because they seem, I can imagine growing up in this time, everything is desensitized. You see everything everywhere, so nothing is sacred. And I think sexuality in general is something you learn on the street, which is obviously something I think these girls are learning. So given that as a basis, what would you imagine as a better foundation? Do you think it's something that should be taught at home, in the schools? At an earlier level, I think people should be presented with their sexuality.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think the Netherlands does a much better job than America does of educating young people about sexuality. And I'm positive, actually, that you have the lowest rates of teen pregnancy and teen transmission of sexually transmitted diseases, and that's because those young people are educated. And in America, unfortunately, we keep pumping more and more money into what's called abstinence-only education. And what that is they tell young people, just say no, don't have sex until you're married. And of course, the problem with that is that, the feminist movement tried to teach us a long time ago, you don't have to get married to be a person, to have a sexuality. And in America, if you're gay, you can't get married. So that's not a good solution to how to have sex, and it doesn't work. I mean, that's the other problem, is that we keep putting money into it, and there's never been a single study that showed that it worked.
Yeah, but on the other hand, there's the thing that I think there in the Netherlands, there are voices who say, well, you have to educate children at age 11 or 12 how to use condoms. And in a way, I think you also could give the message like, well, it's very good that you know how to use them, but maybe it's also a good idea to wait a couple of years.
You could say both of those things, and that's what in America we call comprehensive sex ed. But to qualify for federal funding for sexual education in America, under Bush and under Clinton
as well.
Yeah, he put money into abstinence-only education too, because he had faith.
Yeah, well, but he didn't regard oral sex, so it left.
Well, teens know what he was talking about. Teens knew what he was talking about.
I'm now going to give the word to the man over there. Now he's not paying attention to me. You were waiting with the question already long. Yes. Microphone.
My question is only what's your goal, your objective?
What would I like to have happen? I tell you, I got a letter from a girl who was, I think, 19, and she said, I've been saving up for breast implants since I was 12, and now I read your book and I'm not going to get them. And that's like my goal. If I can, if some young women read this and start to think and start to revisit feminist ideals and start rethinking what they've been taught, then I feel I've made a contribution.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Rosine, and I have a very personal question, because
Oi.
No. I'm curious how to create space for more authentic sexual expression. And there was a question before about sexual role models in this point of view. You didn't give really an answer about it, and of course I understand it, but still my question is, how, because often if you feel sexual about an item, and if you express it as a woman, you're immediately judged. So I'm curious how you see that it's possible to create space outside this culture of judging everything as really flat, bimbo, raunch. Is my question clear?
Sort of. I mean, I think I actually did give an answer. I think that's a real answer, that I can't tell you what's going to turn you on. I don't know you. You know what I mean? If we were involved, I would work on it, but we're not, And I'm not a sex therapist, I'm really not a sex therapist. I don't have the answers beyond saying, start with your own desires. Think about what you want and go after those things, and not about what's going to make you desirable. But I'm not a sex educator.
Yeah, of course, but everything is so quickly always incorporated.
That's true.
It's a culture of incorporating also new styles of expressing sexual freedom.
Yeah.
So this is why sometimes I feel really without any gear to act.
Well, I think that, first of all, I think feminism is gear. I think that, you can take strength.
So the brain is the gear.
Yeah, I think you can take it, but it is. If you sort of move towards empowerment in various ways, I think it puts you in a better position to seek sexual and emotional relationships, actually, with people who are going to give you what you want. And I think I had a conversation with Gloria Steinem about, what's the litmus test for what if what you really like is stripping? If that's what you really like, that's what you should do. And you're lucky that you exist now, because the whole culture is like telling you to do it. So, but I just think that there's a lot of other things people like, and one of the ways you find out what you like is trial and error. That's certainly what I had to do. And the thing that Gloria Steinem said to me that I thought was a good insight was that you can't really fake laughter, and you can't really fake pleasure. You can fake it to somebody else, but if you think something is really funny, or if you think something is really sexually pleasurable. So that's, I think, a good, that's how you tell if you're enjoying something.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much. I think we still have a couple of minutes to go, so I think we have another question.
Why don't we do one more question?
Just one more question, and the lady in red is already standing.
Hi, Ariel. My name is Renate Trom.
Hi.
I have a question for you. I know that you said that your book is about women and directed at women. But what do you think about the men and their growing sexualization in the society? I just saw the barman trying to repair this mic, and my eyes were drawn to his Björn Borgs. So that's why I came up with this question.
What does it mean? What to what?
His Björn Borgs, his shorts behind,
okay, yeah.
under his jeans.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Don't you think it's a cultural phenomenon, and that we should broaden the discussion to that and include the man and try to figure out where in our sexual education things go wrong?
Yeah, a couple points. I mean, I think first of all, if you're saying, well, there should be another book about where do men fit in, but that's not this book. I mean, that maybe you should write that book, And the reason that this book is just about women is I just felt that many feminists had come before me and said this is what men did wrong and this is where men fit in, and I felt that we had made enough progress and come far enough that it was appropriate to say, okay, we've got all this power. What are we going to do? How are we culpable? What can we do?
Yes, but if you only target it at women, then you remain in women's issues. But I think that if you look at the sexualization of men, that it's a cultural phenomenon. But so that we all get more sexualized.
Men are not sexualized in our culture nearly as much as women.
True,
I mean, when's the last time you saw a male strip club?
That's true.
When's the last time you saw men taking cardio striptease classes?
Well, you don't know what's going to happen in 10 years.
In 10 years, we'll talk about it.
Okay. Thanks so much, Ariel Levy.
Thank you so much.
Such a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for having us. Me.
Well, I would like to thank Ariel Levy for your talk and your excellent answers. And thank you very much, Helene Mees, for your questions. And I also would like to thank the audience for all their good questions. I would like to thank Meulenhof for cooperating on this event. I would like to thank Audium, and I would like to thank my staff and all our volunteers who helped out tonight. I would like to mention short here, quickly, that the John Adams Institute is a non-profit organization, and we are completely dependent from our supporters. So if you're not a supporter yet, please sign up today as a member or become a volunteer, because we need a lot of hands as always. For now, I hope to see you again at one of our upcoming lectures. There are many lectures coming. I think you can see them on the screen later on. But on the 14th of May, we will have Michelle Goldberg. Her book is about the religious right in the United States. And we will have Niall Ferguson, the famous historian, the 22nd of May. The book of Ariel Levy is on sale in the back of this room. And she will sign her book here right on stage. Thank you for coming.